Okay. All right, so we've been, if you're watching this after the fact, it was more of it wasn't an effort on my part to welcome, first of all, and it wasn't an effort on my part, because what a misplaced effort this would have been to have excluded anyone. But just so you know, before I pressed record the live group, we moved our bodies around through some gentle positions, sitting and on our backs to open up the hips. So what I would suggest is, if you are just sitting this after the fact, or like watching this recording after the fact, maybe take a couple of minutes to do that. Like I say, it wasn't an intentional non-inclusion. It was just I don't have enough room in my current situation to have recorded that, and so there it is. And if you're wondering about hints for how to do that, I know I've posted the hip opening sequence, so it wouldn't be exactly what we've done, but it lives online. So okay, so today's sit is the fourth of four in we were doing the series on the four immeasurables, or at least inspired by them. So just a quick review there. We started with, and again, these are, I did these not even intentionally out of order, it's just the order that felt right to tackle them this time through. To teach it again, I might take a completely reverse order, just to be clear. And I also wanted to point that out, now that we're here at the end, in the sense that I think our minds like to categorize things, and we live in a very competitive society. So often we want to find or create or see hierarchies where they really don't need to exist. And in particular, when we get into systems of yoga and meditation, I know that often there are interesting or esoteric or what have you debates about this is better than that, or this comes first and that comes second. And I think that different traditions and different practitioners are going to have different impressions of this. From my standpoint, there is no hierarchy. They're all just different ways of being, different ways of practicing. And I think specific to this meta practice that we've been doing in an ongoing way over the last number of weeks, they truly are overlapping and complementary. And it's not so much that they're not only not hierarchical, is that I genuinely think that they're a match set. If that makes sense. Like you can't have one without the other to some extent. You may have moments of really focused, direct, like loving kindness, which was our first meditation because it's the one that people know perhaps best. And from there we moved into sympathetic joy. And then our last sit together, our last meditation, we had done equanimity, or what I like to think of as okayness. And today we move into compassion. And so you see, my point is that, I think that equanimity is a practice that underlies all of them. Like if you don't have that quality to some extent, it's easy enough to get kind of overtaken or consumed by some of those other ways of being. And similarly, it's difficult to feel compassion or love without feeling joy on behalf of others. You see what I mean? Like they're all just like, chocolate and peanut butter, unless I guess you're allergic to peanuts. All right. So our sit today is around compassion. And I guess the other thing I would point out is that on a few of these weeks, I've offered they're called, whether it's mantra or prayer or whatever, however you want to think of it, but a kind of a series of phrases that we tend to repeat. And again, they're the most common ones there for, loving kindness, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I live with ease, and there are sort of interchangeable phrases of that sort. And I offered them to the group in a couple of the meditations, but not in others. Okay? Today I'm going to offer us some phrases. And I think that what I would suggest here just at the outset, so sometimes we just jump right in and sometimes there's a little setup. So here's the little setup. if you find that you are comfortable practicing, or I should say, if you find that you are not typically comfortable without an anchor, a meditative anchor, in other words, whether that's breath or a feeling in your body somewhere or a point that you're looking at, even the back of your eyelids, whatever it is, then maybe establish that now, okay? Truth be told, my favorite, and I'm actually going to sit eyes open this time simply because I haven't committed these phrases to memory, and I want to be able to call them out to you without stumbling on them. But my go-to is to, if I want an anchor for myself, is just to close my eyes and to let everything get fuzzy, like to just feel the sort of entirety of my body in space, and as a series of essentially incoming sensations and like feedback, okay, somatic feedback, as opposed to being super, just about the breath or just about this or that. But pick what works for you, okay? Maybe beginning with, if nothing else, 3 rests where we tune in a bit more specifically to our breath. Just to slow down. Allowing ourselves to arrive. Good. And so whether it's your breath or your body or something in your environment, just know that, and again, you might be anchor-less or object-less. So you be you, but just know that if you become distracted, if you need a reset, if you're feeling sort of overwhelmed with emotion or what have you, then tune back in, and then you can pick the meditation instructions back up when it feels right. So I think rather than read these 4 phrases and have you sit with them in their entirety, I mean, each single phrase is arguably its own practice, and you can just stay here with breath. So we're beginning now. You're saying, what? The meditation's begun and he's still talking, and maybe I'm thinking about this. You don't have to think hard. There's no puzzle here. Just kind of let it wash over you, if that makes sense. So you truly could take one of these phrases, any one of them, and just sit a meditation with that as your focus. Or you could, zoom in the other direction and say all 4 sequentially, one out, repeating very mantra-like. We're going to find a middle ground today, which is to say, I'm going to read one of the phrases, and you can just repeat it. I'll read it, actually, I'll say it several times. And maybe even in your internal monologue, repeating silently to yourself, picking those words up, and just being with that, staying with that for a few minutes until I drop the next set of instructions in. Okay? We're all good with that? Okay. Yeah, nice. Okay. And I've got a little story about compassion, but I'm going to save that to the end today. Oh, see, out of habit, I've taken my glasses off, and I'm going to need those. All right, phrase number 1. May I be attentive and gentle toward my own discomfort and suffering. So we were sharing a little bit before I pressed record today, but some of the dealing with other people's energy, maybe that's a good way to put it. Or just the impact of living in a social world, and how much that can nourish us and sustain us, but also how it can be taxing. And so this is a feeling that we're cultivating. This isn't something we're thinking for ourselves. We're really, like, through your body and in your mind, feeling out, or feeling in, I guess I should say, May I be attentive and gentle toward my own discomfort and suffering. And if the may sounds, adding the word may sounds too equivocal, I am attentive and gentle toward my own discomfort and suffering. I am attentive and gentle toward my own discomfort and suffering. And just see what comes up. You don't have to look for something to be compassionate about. You can just repeat that phrase, or just go with the flow and see what happens. See what does pop in there into your sort of active awareness. May I be attentive and gentle toward my own discomfort and suffering. So we don't want to get into, certainly for this practice today, don't feel the need to jump ahead to offering that compassion to others. We'll get there. We start with you. Self-sustenance. Sit with that for a moment, and then I'm just gonna, before we get into a next phrase, I'll drop an idea or two in there. May I be attentive and gentle to my own discomfort and suffering. So there's two components there, and they're equally important, and yet I think that I'm not going to speak for anyone else. I'll speak for myself. I often leave the gentle part out. So we have the mindfulness component, being attentive, being intentional. And then we have the quality of being gentle, being kind. Because I would argue, and I argue from experience here, that mindfulness without that compassion of gentleness is a special sort of hell. We really want to shower ourselves here with not just attention, but compassion. Good. And I see some changes in body position too, which is fantastic. The sign of intelligent practice. That is the start of compassion, is putting your body into a shape where it can be attended to gently. Okay, so now I'm going to drop in, I'll add a phrase. So, may I be attentive and gentle toward my own discomfort and suffering. And may I be attentive and grateful for my own joy and well-being. May I be attentive and grateful for my own joy and well-being. So we slide through the spectrum, staying with the self, but the gentleness of staying with discomfort and suffering is transformed into gratitude toward the joy and well-being that we experience. I am attentive and grateful for my own joy and well-being. May I be attentive and grateful for my own joy and well-being. So completely normal, natural, and not to be resisted if images come up here, if thoughts make an appearance. Whether those are, as they tend to be, rooted in the past or in the imagined future, or that feeling of gratitude rooted in attention might be some small bit of real estate in your body that feels joyful, that feels alive. Again, not looking for it so much as letting it find you. So we're tending here, and this really is the heart of compassion, isn't it? To stay, to be attentive, whether it is to discomfort or joy, whether it is to suffering or well-being. Because none of those things is permanent. So we're not grasping and trying to hold on to the good feels, or at least we're noting when we tend to do that. And equally so, we're trying to stay with and be kind, be gentle, as we attend to the very real feelings of discomfort, of sorrow, of suffering. And maybe taking some comfort as well in the fact that those are just passing states of being. Suffering dissolves into joy. And joy itself transitions into discomfort, and round we go. So we don't need to get too worked up about it all. It's just this weird thing we called life. Okay, so again, rather than add on new, I'm going to build. And again, know that you can stay with whatever point of focus seems fruitful. So these are just suggestions. So if you're really in a zone with one of the earlier phrases that I've offered, then feel free to stay there. May I be attentive and gentle toward my own discomfort and suffering. May I be attentive and grateful for my own joy and well-being. May I move toward others freely and with openness. May I move toward others freely and with openness. So now our self-compassion becomes more externally oriented. We invite in the others with an open heart. And I think implied in this is, in openness, is without necessarily an agenda, without a list of things that we're trying to accomplish. May I move toward others freely and with openness. Openness means not necessarily trying to change anything about your experience. Not necessarily trying to fix anything or focus on how this other person or other people that you're encountering in your life might be different. May I move toward others freely and with openness. Easy to say, monumentally more challenging to do. So again, gentle and kind with yourself. Doing your best and knowing that it's a practice. We always just try again, pick it up. Oh, I messed up. I said something sharp, or I offered an unsolicited judgment, or I noticed in retrospect that I was closed-minded, or maybe didn't give people a fair hearing. So not putting yourself on trial for all of that. We all do it. We all do. Instead, just repeating that intention. We're not running away from relationship. May I move toward others freely and with openness. See how that feels. See where that takes you. Maybe just noticing your own willingness to be moved toward others, or where resistance presents itself. And just breathe into it. Relax. Be gentle. Be patient. Be free. And this can be hard. It can feel very challenging. There's courage here. Knowing that to be in relationship with others means to suffer. Means that we will encounter difficulty and loss and miscommunication and and all the joys and wonder too, right? But to move toward freely, like of your own accord, and to remain open, and to be open to learning and reflecting about when you didn't and trying again. Courageous. Okay, so let's drop in our fourth phrase, putting it all together, building from where we've been. May I be attentive and gentle toward my own discomfort and suffering. May I be attentive and grateful for my own joy and well-being. May I move toward others freely and with openness. May I receive others with sympathy and understanding. May I receive others with sympathy and understanding. So just as our first two phrases were very much mirrors of one another, centered in the self, the latter two are mirrors, in a sense, of one another, centered not so much in other people as in our relationship with and to them. Consider them together. May I move toward others freely and with openness. May I receive others with sympathy and understanding. There can be a tendency in wanting to have a sense of control over our own experience, but it can be challenging to truly receive others without trying to change anything about them or what that relationship is like. So there is a patience and even love there. Maybe it is someone that we care about who is hurting us inadvertently, or hopefully not intentionally, but that there's friction there, or there's challenges that we face because of the relationship. Not even because of anything that anyone said or did, just because we're all different. We're all trying to make sense of what is and what isn't, and how to relate to one another. And so, both in spite of and maybe even because of the richness that can exist in our relationships, say, I receive others with sympathy and with understanding. There's an intention. Openness and understanding. And although these phrases are set up very much as a series of, looking at the self and then looking at the self in relation to others, I think that when you put all of these together, you might feel that those boundaries between self and other start to get a bit blurry, or at least they might seem a bit arbitrary. Compassion is seeing ourselves in others and seeing others in ourselves. Compassion is about being a friend to ourselves. Not a drill sergeant, not even a cheerleader, a friend. And being that friend to others as well. With the good and sometimes with the not so good. Staying open. Staying present. Staying. For the last minute of our sit, feel free to reset. Just read all the phrases to you one final time, or state them to you one final time. And if it helps you to feel them, you might say them silently to yourself, or just let them drop in where they do. May I be attentive and gentle toward my own discomfort and suffering. May I be attentive and grateful for my own joy and well-being. May I move toward others freely and with openness. May I receive others with sympathy and with understanding. In other words, may I meet my experience of myself, of others, and of the world with compassion. And may I be kind and stay present when I recognize that I haven't done that, and recommit, trying again. Okay, and when you're ready, we come out. There you go. Now I should say too, I'll email those phrases along if you'd like. I know in previous weeks that had been a request. I'm happy to do that. I was going to share actually, and this I don't mind doing on the camera. Just because I think that I want to stay with my own experience and I want to kind of own it. So I had an interesting experience a few days ago. I was asked to be part of a panel for one of the yoga studios in town, talking about my experience as a yoga teacher in training a number of years ago. And it was a panel, so there were half a dozen of us, and it was, it was very, very cool in that we had all gone through roughly the same training and had such, our practices and our lives and everything radically different, very diverse, which I think is just really awesome. And again, not that it should break down in these kind of traditional gendered ways of being, but I reference it, if only for myself. This is how I was thinking of it. Is that of the panelists, the other 5 were women, or identify to the best of my knowledge as female, and I was the lone male representative. And in sharing such personal observances, it's like you could almost really palpably feel the emotion in people's voices, and it was a Zoom thing, but how they were carrying themselves, and just how important all of this is that we were talking about. And in any case, all 5 of uh, my female co-panelists held it together, emotionally speaking. And when the camera turned around, I was the last speaker, and I absolutely lost my shit. I became really emotional, and I kind of could feel it coming. Like I actually said at the end, so like, okay, so I have a feeling I'm gonna gush, and sure enough, I did. And and then I made a conscious choice in that moment to stay, which is to say, I had about 10 minutes to talk, and I knew, like I intellectually knew in that moment that if I paused and kind of gathered myself, that I could be more composed, that in other words, that I could kind of, rally and get it together and then just talk. But meaning like talk up here, not really talk from here. And I invited the group to actually take a breath or two with me, which they did and I did. And it wasn't like I needed more time. And then I was like, no, you know what? That's, not necessary. I really felt like in that moment that, showing that vulnerability and just being okay with not being how I think a lot of times we have our own sense of what's expected, and if something doesn't fit, whether that's in ourselves or in others, we want to push it down or get rid of it or whatever. And I kind of thought, no, this is the truest experience of where I'm at right here and right now as I was talking, and the stuff was important to me. And so I even though I recognize, like, and in the back of my mind, I kind of thought, these people are going to think that this guy's just absolutely bonkers, right? Like he's or he's undergoing some emotionally turbulent times, like, is he all right, kind of thing. And what was interesting is Krista, my partner, was part of the panel as well, and had just spoken just prior to me, and I think she was looking on, with a little bit of concern as well, like, is what? Wow, this is unexpected. And I explained to the group, but I explained to her as well after, that I actually wasn't upset, not at all. I was like it was like tears of joy. It was like really like the pride and I don't mean prideful, but like esteem about being part of that community, and the gratitude of all these different experiences that I'd been through. And yeah, just like I felt like the most compassionate thing I could do was to just let it out and roll with it and not try to push it down, which, that's, I think it's been observed that, there are particular emotional states of being that are prescribed, and that, again, it tends to be really gendered. Men and women are expected to be a certain way or present a certain way. And so I like to kind of, flipping the table there, and intentionally being stirred up, or at least not trying to run away from it. So, so that's my hot take over the past week in terms of how compassion came out in my own practice. Mm-hmm. So there you go. Anything from you? Any comments? Any questions? Not even about that, about the practice, about what we were talking about before, anything at all? Very good. That's a nice descriptor. They are very sweet, aren't they? Yeah. And they're, I don't know, there's this, isn't it even, with a, is it, I'm going to mispronounce it, Desiderata, there's this poem about, life with all its sham drudgery and broken dreams, the universe is still unfolding as it should. There's something like that to me is always struck me the same way. It's like when you hear or you're emotionally involved in a story that's ostensibly a sad story, but it's so sweet in that, and not even bittersweet, but just like, so yeah, I'm glad if they landed that way. That's very cool. So, and I like each of us, me on camera, not, but today shared, like I said before pressing record, and in fact, momentarily, I'm gonna say goodbye to the people watching online, but I'll just finish this thought out, is that you might actually sit with like I say, one of these phrases, all of these phrases as a group, and if whatever life, and whether it's your relationship to yourself or your relationship with others, as we were talking about before we went live, and maybe these phrases bring you, and more to the point, the feelings that underlie them, bring you some comfort, bring you some perspective. Yeah. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they're maybe it's something else. In any case, yeah, there it is. Bye out there, everyone.